What's going on, guys? This is going to be our Summary of Markets, episode 98. Bear with me, I'm still pretty sick. I've got a lot of sinus pressure, stuffed nose, and whatnot, so I probably sound a little bad during this video, but I'm going to try my best. So let's get started. As always, we're going to talk about SPY and Qs. We're going to go into gold, oil, USDJPY, and then close it up with Bitcoin, Ethereum, and then we're going to move on to the options and stock watch list after that. So starting off with SPY, we did have a decent week last week, pretty much had that beautiful dragonfly candle, and then we had 3 days of just pretty much straight up. It was a very textbook dragonfly where you had that gap down, put in that nice hammer candle, gapped up, and then we broke all of our resistance. So we somewhat did get that Santa Claus rally that everyone was waiting on, right? So this little rally here, obviously, it was just a little micro rally, like 1 week, instead of seeing like a massive multi-week rally, which honestly we still could see if it has some strong momentum going into next week. What we would need to see for that to happen would be a break of around 472 and then get into 476 to 479. That would be the breakout point that we're looking for. If you can start pushing above 479, then you're looking for around 481 and then 489, which would be the next major breakout targets. But for now, we're kind of in like a somewhat like a triple top, maybe even quadruple top. You can see a lot of resistance around this like 470 area. Topped out here, right here, and then almost twice right there. And then on Friday, that's where we closed. We haven't topped there or I guess that'd be on Thursday, but it is still around that same resistance. So until we really start to find value above that previous all-time high, which was like what, 473.50, I would be a little worried about this sell pressure we got going on here. But above that, like I said, look for those targets. If you can't break that area, we filled this gap here, so that's not a problem. But we do actually have a new gap down here around 455. So first support would be around that VWAP, OTS trail. Got a lot of support lining up right there around the 50-day, around that 462 area. But if you lose that, then you want to look for that gap around 455, okay? The Momo is pinching bullishly here, but we haven't really taken off just yet. It is trying to develop a new uptrend, but it has not pushed. I'd say you want to see it above at least 10 before you start to look very bullish. Right now, it's only about 2, okay? Qs is basically the same story. You're kind of hovering around some resistance, anywhere from like 400 to like 403, 404. If you can start to find some value above 404, then you're looking for around 410. If it can't break that level, you still have the 50-day and a little bit of support around 386, but the main support would be down there around that pivot around 383. Same thing with the Momo here. The Momo's trying to climb, but hasn't really triggered a bullish move just yet. Moving on to gold, you do have a nice little bottom here. It could be somewhat of a bulldog. We look at the 4-hour here. You had kind of a bottom, curve back, bottom, pop up, and then pull back. You have that bulldog coming in, kind of breaking out of it. We did have that bulldog call the previous bottom on gold. So not looking too bad. If it can break above that 1820 mark, look for that 1835 into that 1860. Now, if we can't break that VWAP level, you have a cluster of support around that 1790. Moving on to oil, also bottoming a little bit here. You do have somewhat of a pivot bounce. And you have the 200 EMA being reclaimed, and you're also reclaiming the OTS trail. So in the meantime, if you can maintain above, I'd say like 72 to, yeah, let's just say 72, make it nice and clean, kind of around that 72 level right here. As long as you can maintain above that, it looks fairly bullish into the 50-day, which would be around like 77. If you lose 72, probably back down to the 200 EMA around 69. USDJPY trying to reclaim strength here, but it looks somewhat like a head and shoulders here if you do start to roll over. So we do want to see a break above that previous shoulder around 115, 114.70 to be exact. If you can break above 115, look for a new high, probably into 116. But for now, I would be a little worried that this is somewhat of a rollover top and you could fall back down to like 112. Let's move on to Bitcoin, Ethereum. I actually have that pulled up on my other chart. So Bitcoin bounced almost perfectly off that level that I gave you guys around, what was it? 45.7. That was that about 50% of the wick. So it came down to retest that wick. There's actually an even cleaner chart that we talked about in Discord last week. Look at this chart here. So we had this little channel that we are pushing down into that wick target, and then we were able to break the channel on December 21st, and then it gave you this beautiful doji retest on December 22nd. Then we had the breakout. So it was a beautiful break of the channel, retest, find support, and then breakout. Very clean. So for now, if it can hold above the 200 EMA, which is 40, let's just say 49.9, that would be the bullish point to go for a second impulse. Now, the first target that I gave you guys was around 51.750, or what was it? It was 50,700 to around like 51.2, basically this little zone right here. So that zone has been hit, so your target has been hit. But your next target would be that pivot around 52.7. If you can break above that, you're looking for the zone around 54,000 to be easy. If it breaks below 49,000, look for a retest of that bearish channel, which would lead you down somewhere around 47,000. But for now, I would lean bullish as long as it holds on to the 200 EMA. Now, moving on to Ethereum, pretty much the same thing. You did break the channel, didn't give you that very clean retest that Bitcoin gave you, but it still looks fairly bullish heading out of that channel. As long as you can maintain this trend right here, putting in higher lows on each consecutive wick, it is fairly bullish, especially maintaining above the double pivot, the pivot at 4,000 and the pivot at 39.42. So for now, you're holding above the trend, holding above the pivots. Your next target would be around 42.80. If you can break that, you're probably looking for around 4,500. Now, if we lose this trend, you would be looking for a retest of the channel, which would be somewhere around 38. And if you got back down into the channel, you would be looking for the 200 EMA somewhere around 35. For now, I would definitely lean bullish. All right, that was the summary markets. Let's move on to the watch list. The watch list is extremely small this week. I only had a few names that I am keeping an eye on. I've been trying to look for leaps with a couple of these names. Sadly, we tried to grab leaps on Snapchat, which we'll go over here in a little bit, but we missed our fill on that. Let's get started with Disney first. So Disney, you had this pivot retest around 142, and then you also had a pivot around 147. So it's funny, you actually retested this pivot, bounced, and then came back down to retest this pivot here, and then bounced off that. So it's putting in a higher low, looks fairly bullish. You are trying to break, or you are breaking, I guess you could say, the OTS trail, but you have not flipped the trail bullish. Once that trail flips green, you should be looking for around 159 to 160, and then your overall target would be around 167 on that 200 EMA. AMD is breaking out of this falling wedge, maintaining that 50-day. As long as you maintain above the 50-day here, you are breaking the OTS trail. As soon as that flips green, excuse me, you should be able to get around 155, okay? So keep an eye on 155, and then your overall target on that would be the daily high around 165. Snapchat, we tried to play leaps here on Thursday, which was the last day of the week. I tried to get filled and we missed it by think it was like $20 or $30 or something like that on the options contract. But I do like the leaps here long term. You could play like 2 years out. We were looking for the 2023 leaps. We were looking for the 70s, I believe it was. I was trying to play the gap fill. And those are already up like 50%. So I'll probably have to look for a different contract. Or I'm going to wait to see if we see a pullback on those contracts. You don't want to buy leaps on days where the stock is doing very well because they're leaps, right? So you have so much time to get into those contracts. You don't want to get into the contracts when their premium is being boosted on a green day, like a 4%, 5% day, right? You want to look for a red day to get in those leaps. So we're still going to keep an eye on those leaps. I'm looking for somewhere around the gap, so anywhere from 70 to 75. And we're looking for at least a year out, so looking at like 2023. But I really like the daily bull div. I really like the weekly pivot, and I like the monthly pivot. So it's on very long-term support. So as long as you can maintain that support, I think it is a very strong candidate for some leaps. Another one we're watching is Ford. You're still in that distribution. You tried to break out in the beginning of December. It was not able to do it. I still stand by the idea that I believe Ford is going to start being priced as an EV company, not as an old school automotive company. And it's not going to be anytime soon, but for the long term, talking like 3 to 5 plus years out, I think Ford is going to start to be priced more as an EV company, which will lead it to have much higher multiples. If you look at the EV companies, their multiples are extraordinarily high compared to the revenue and their EPS that they put out. Their multiples are massive compared to companies like Ford or GM or Toyota or any of these other companies that are like old school automotive, right? Like compare the multiples on Lucid or Tesla or NIO to Ford, right? So I think Ford is going to start doing very well long term, looking at on like a monthly basis. Now, right now, I think Ford is a little high as far as this impulse goes. Looking at 2022 all the way down to $4, now it's at 21, breaking a near 20-year high. So I think Ford can pull back. I think what it's doing is it's actually a massive monthly bulldog. So we have the bottom curved back, pop up, and now we're waiting on the head. So it could be a nasty year for Ford, or maybe even the year after 2023. But whenever it does put in that monthly pullback, I think Ford is a very strong bet. And you could even start building now and dollar cost average into it long term. But regardless, the plan is still the same. I think that it is going to be priced as an EV company moving forward. Sorry, it's a little hard to talk. Moving on to Micron, or not Micron, sorry, Altria, MO. Their tickers are similar. Little pullback on dividends. Had a pretty nasty hammer candle off that pivot. I'm still in leaps on Altria. We closed our leaps for about 65, 70%, I believe it was. We actually rolled them. So the ones that we rolled into are down about 20% thanks to that dividend day, but no big deal. We still have plenty of time, and I might even add on to them, but we'll see. Typically with rolls, you don't want to add on to rolls because you've already taken profit on the original contract. But as far as Altria goes, I still like this pattern long term. Let me see if I can pull it up on my other chart here. Yeah, so like we got in down here, we added on to them, and then they ripped and we closed pretty much at the top, but we rolled them here. So we are still holding contracts. We originally had the 45s. We rolled them into the 4750s, I believe it was. So we're a little red on these, down about 20%, but that's okay. It's still breaking a long-term falling wedge. If it holds on to the pivot, I think long-term we are going to get that $50 mark, or at least the gap fill here. Uber is another one that we took. Sadly, we missed our fill. We took it down here. We tried to add on this bottom here. We missed it by about 5 cents. Really disgusting that we missed that, but they are up about 70% now. So you could look to close these into the new year. I did not want to close them before the end of the year. Obviously, you'd have to pay taxes. So I'm going to hold them into the new year. But they're up 60% at this point. We are still looking for at least around 47. If we could get around 50 to 52, I'll probably start rolling these contracts. We bought them. I think our delta was close to like 30. Let me see what our delta is now. I think our delta was closer to 45 or something like that. If it starts to get to around 60 to 70 delta, that's typically when I start to roll leaps. I do not like holding leaps when they are that high delta. The whole point of leaps, or at least the way that I use them, I like to buy them around 30 delta, which would be a lotto in the standard terms. But because they are a leap and they have so much time on them, I don't consider them a lotto. But I'll typically buy them around 30 to 40 delta. And once they start to push into like 60 or 70 delta, that's when I roll them back into that 30 to 40 delta. So right now we're in profit, but we're not at the point where I should be rolling these. So once they start to get a little higher, we'll think to push those out. But in the meantime, as long as it maintains around 41 to 39, I am going to hold on to these contracts. Not a whole lot of updates on the rest of my portfolio. Uranium still bouncing a little bit. Petco finding a bottom. PayPal still finding a bottom. Coinbase bounced beautifully off that pivot. You do have a pivot to pivot move where we bounced back into the pivot here, but you still have a long way to go to be green on this, really. You have to break above these two anchor VWAPs above that pivot. That would look fairly good. But then we have that IPO high kind of around 381, which would be the point in which you want to hold value above that level to be bullish. It still looks like it's doing exactly what almost every IPO did in 2021, where you IPO'd. This one actually you just went straight down. Typically they tried to go higher and then they went down. Then you had this very long accumulation phase, and then they had a very nice long-term impulse finding value higher. So I still think Coinbase is in the accumulation stage, obviously. But if it starts to find value above that 381, then you're looking at that long-term impulse higher. You would need a very strong bull market on crypto to help Coinbase out. But in all honesty, crypto looks really good. So it could be a bull market in 2022 for crypto. So keep an eye on those crypto stocks like Coinbase or MicroStrategy or any of the miners, the smaller companies as well. All right, moving on to big tech, and we'll call it a video. Microsoft hitting our close target around 336. Next target would be 339, excuse me. If you can break above 339.50, look for around 344, which was that previous high. Apple still heading into our target around 179. Above that, look for 182. Facebook, I still think Facebook looks like a sloppy bulldog. So I still think we're in for a very nice impulse into that 350 to 357 area. But as long as it maintains above the 200 EMA, I think this is a bulldog. Netflix hitting our target around 613. Next target would be around 642. You could target this previous high around 630 as well. As long as it maintains above the pivot, looks fairly bullish. Excuse me. Amazon has a double pivot resistance still above you. If you can hold above 34.76, look for that 35.20. and then look for that 3600. If you can't get above these pivots, it might come back down to retest the 200 EMA around 33.57. As long as you maintain above this long-term uptrend, I think you're just getting ready for a nice impulse higher. Tesla is smashing our targets. The 1017, 1038, both have been hit. We do have a target around 1082, very close to hitting that. If you can break that, look for the next target, probably somewhere around 1150 to 1160. If you lose the pivots, look for around 950. You do have a new gap, which would be around right there, around 939. But alright guys, sorry about my voice this video. It's probably a little hard to keep up, but I appreciate you guys watching regardless. If you guys like the content, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you're not already. I will be streaming tomorrow, or maybe, but I'm going to be doing a morning call tomorrow, no afternoon stream. So next week, we're probably going to be keeping with the morning calls and not the afternoon streams. But keep an eye on my Twitter, keep an eye on Discord if I do change up that plan. But most likely, I will see you guys tomorrow morning. See you later, guys.